So thank you so much for inviting me to come. It's a pleasure to be here, and a topic that I feel very passionately about. So I've been asked to speak for about 30 minutes. I'm going to try and speak for less than that because I think having more time on the panel would be a good thing. So I'm basically going to get us warmed up. So I am a designer. I tend to be labelled a service designer. So that kind of places me within the stack or within a project team. And the end of 2015, I started a company called IF. We're a design studio. We're made of designers and developers, and we specialise in privacy and security. We work closely with clients to build products and services that put people in control of data. And we also investigate emerging user needs. So what are the user needs for privacy and security? And we do that through a non-profit arm that we have called Research by IF. What we want to do is to help show companies the benefits of putting people in control of information, but also the positives of being more accountable for how they use it. So today I'm going to talk about bias in technology, and I wanted to start by saying that this really isn't a new topic. The things that we have made have always had different biases, and indeed in this presentation I'm going to talk from my perspective as a kind of short female. So this has my own biases and indeed privileges written into it. I'm going to start with power tools because these products have got biases written into them too. They tend to be designed as really heavy objects that actually, for women that don't have the same muscle mass as men, they're pretty hard to keep held up to drill a hole or to use to cut some wood. They're just too heavy and often deliberately designed for men rather than for women too. Hands up, who is a woman in here and feels like the pain of having a lack of pockets? Like we're always expected to have to carry a purse, or we won't be holding the money anyway, so it's no problem. It turns out that this has been an issue since fashion began, and the V&A have got a really interesting write-up of the history of pockets on their website, which if you're interested in reading more, I recommend you look at that. Also in other everyday objects like seatbelts, seatbelts are a lot less safe for women. In fact, you're just under 50% more likely to have a serious injury in a crash compared to a man. And that's because women tend to be a bit shorter, and because the way the seatbelts are designed, they were designed with one kind of dummy, which generally represented a kind of standard size of gentleman. So yeah, that's not too cool. And also, I don't know if any of you, many of you would have ridden in a car with a seatbelt across you for a long journey, and you know just how uncomfortable it is to get cut right between your boobs as you're trying to, do a 3-hour journey up to Sheffield or whatever. Like, these things are not designed for us. And then you've got podiums. Luckily, this one's not too bad, just about. But I often speak at podiums that are far too high because podiums are just not designed for women to say important things at. They're only designed for men to say those things. And then hand dryers. In toilets, the number of times I've gone to dry my hands and there's just water running down my arms because I have to kind of lift them up, because these things have been positioned by the male technicians who are that much taller than me. This stuff really sucks. And air conditioning, which, these are biases that are built in. We can't even see this. We're talking about temperature. And that's that most office buildings are a good few degrees too chilly for women. I don't know if any of you have noticed that at work. You feel it's a bit nippy. And that's again because they're designed, or the temperature is set for men who have a greater muscle mass to be comfortable. So this bias is in products that are quite obvious, from power tools to things like temperature that are really quite difficult to sense or to talk about because you can't see it. So what happens when those biases get transferred into something like a search box? It gets really hard to see those. And it gets really hard if you don't even get given them in the first place. I'm sure many of you read about Google's search algorithms for women. They weren't displaying the highest paid jobs. It was only if you were a man and you were searching for jobs that you saw higher paid adverts. Women wouldn't even get to see that. The Apple Watch that came out, I want to say last year, but I feel like it was maybe the year before that now. But when the Apple Watch came out, the heart rate function didn't work if you had tattoos on your wrists, and particularly if those tattoos were coloured. So especially if you were someone with dark skin and a tattoo or like a sleeve, that heart rate function just didn't work. Now, I think that speaks somewhat, perhaps, to the kind of testing groups that Apple were using these watches on in-house, the kind of diversity of the groups they were testing with, perhaps. But it was just really annoying for those people who had tattooed wrists that wanted to wear the watch, because whenever the heart rate monitor sensed that it wasn't on its owner's wrists, it would automatically lock you out. So it was like the most useless watch you could have bought. Apple launching HealthKit, which was advertised as a kind of comprehensive system for tracking human health, but seemed to forget half of us who have periods every month, and that might be an important thing to track. Like, it got shipped without that function being part of it. And some of those biases have got implications for privacy and security. There are bits of services or products that people don't think are a problem for them. They don't think that collecting certain bits of information will be a problem, because that's not a problem for me. But for other users, that becomes a real issue. And those kind of data collection points or biases become so ingrained, they might get then written into data policies, become legislation, and these things become really hard to change. So in some slight ways, these kind of biases are sometimes redefining what privacy, a fundamental human right, means now in an age of code and software. A super smart lady called Susan Cox-Smith says that male metrics continue to be the standard on which all our user experiences are modelled. Well, I would say that young, wealthy, straight, cis male metrics continue to be the standard on which all our user experiences are modelled. So finding and addressing bias in our work is more important than ever, especially as the way the things we use that have these biases in them get abstracted and further away from us to be able to understand. Those biases are being kind of encapsulated in objects that we can't look inside. It's very hard to understand how they work, why they make decisions. So there are things that we just learn to accept and think of as normal when they're not. And these biases that creep into code and software have huge impacts on people's well-being, on their prospects, on their security. And as those biases are ingrained into software that's being shipped globally, they're not just kind of local, we're shipping it into products that are global. These issues are felt by everyone across the world, everyone that's, not you. Most people are not young, Wealthy, straight, cis, or male? Let's discuss. Thank you.